to West Asia analyst Chris Doyle. He's now joining us from London, and he's the director and spokesperson of Council of Arab-British Understanding. Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. First, tell us, how do you think West Asia views a Trump presidency? Because on the one hand, Trump's policies traditionally have kept them wary of his presidency, and on the other, he's talking about ending the war. How would you perhaps view it in terms of the wars that are on in West Asia, and of course the general conflict that the region is ridden with?
I think the first thing to point out for most of those in West Asia, in Israel, in Palestine and Lebanon in particular, the sense that the war is continuing. That's a reality. The insecurity is there, and the United States administration under Joe Biden had not brought about any ceasefires, had actually been complicit in many people's eyes with the atrocities that were going on. So there is no particular love for the Harris administration, but at the same time there's a nervousness about another second term for Donald Trump. That is in part because you're never really quite sure what you're going to get with him. Yes, he says that he wants to end these wars, but there isn't a blueprint. There isn't something that you can tangibly grasp to say this is how he's going to do it. This is how he's going to do something that President Biden and Kamala Harris were unable to do. And you see, certainly within Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu and those settlers who are absolutely thrilled with the Donald Trump victory, because they remember the 4 years of his first term when he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem and declared that the US recognized that as the capital of Israel, that he helped push forward the settlement project. He said that the Golan Heights, which is Syrian territory, was part of Israel. All of these things were major victories at the time for Benjamin Netanyahu. So I think there are many in Israel who are looking forward to this. But generally, I think the region is somewhat nervous. It was before these elections. It will remain so. And it will remain so until you do get a real and lasting ceasefire. Now, there are other issues why the region also, could be, nervous, because you don't know what the trade policies are, climate policies. These are all issues that, of course, will affect not just West Asia, but other areas of the globe. So it's that lack of clarity, perhaps, for the moment. But maybe one could say that this area and others, having seen Trump's presidency from 2017, for the sort of style of presidency that he will bring. We know what he's like. We have some sort of, idea that he's not going to be your typical American president at all, far from it, and everyone will adjust. So, yeah, it's uncertain times.
Jody, let me now go across to you. You spoke to us earlier of how Benjamin Netanyahu had congratulated Donald Trump. Jody, if you can hear me, and I would like to bring you in on this. Chris very keenly pointed out to the dilemma that West Asia faces in terms of Biden administration's stance in West Asia and a possible Trump presidency. How is Israel viewing it? Because on the one hand, the Biden administration, as it was accused of supporting the war in West Asia, supporting Israel, so is Trump's presidency. So was there ever a dilemma for Israel there?
Two-thirds of Israelis were supporting President Trump's comeback. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu...
We seem to have lost Jody's connection there. Chris, let me just throw that question across to you. You did point this dilemma out. Do you think there was ever any hesitation towards a Biden presidency, so to say, in Israel's view? Because, as you pointed out, Biden's administration was accused of possibly supporting the wars in West Asia. And on the other hand, Israel is looking forward to the Trump presidency as well, as is demonstrated by Netanyahu's message congratulating Trump after what we've seen of the election results so far?
President Biden, I mean, throughout his political career, has been a very warm supporter of the state of Israel, but he wasn't always that close to Netanyahu, held him responsible really for undermining the Obama administration, the Iran deal that Obama signed up to. So there was tensions between those two. So I think that those on the right in Israel saw that Trump would put less pressure on Israel in terms of the way that it conducts these wars. It will be that he would be, as he has been in his first term, always highly, highly supportive of Israel. So it wasn't a choice between an anti-Israel candidate and a pro one, between a pro-Israel candidate and a very pro-Netanyahu candidate in Trump. So I think that, that would be the key there. For Palestinians, of course, they just see both as being anti-Palestinian, that Trump will probably be worse on that front. And of course, there's all this Islamophobic rhetoric for West Asia that also will be somewhat nerve-wracking, because Donald Trump, he was the president who promised a ban on all Muslim entry into the United States. He has certainly earned a reputation for embracing anti-Muslim speech, so he's not seen as favourable to that. So there will be nervousness there as well from them. But there will be various leaders, particularly in the Gulf, maybe Egypt as well, who will also see at a leadership level that Donald Trump will be sympathetic to them. He seemed to have a very good relationship to President Sisi of Egypt, for example, and Saudis and the Emiratis. Though the critics would say that Trump had a record of being very close to dictators and not so warm to America's traditional democratic
Chris, I'm going to just ask you another short question before I go over to our correspondent, Jody. You point out the difference of distinction between a pro-Israel and a very pro-Israel presidency. Would you say that this was also how Biden, perhaps within the Democrats, was an outlier, wherein perhaps countries like Israel were not really supporting a Kamala Harris bid as they were Joe Biden's?
I think that the issue of how Gaza played out in this election is very relevant in terms of Michigan. We see a lot of Arab Americans who clearly voted against Kamala Harris. Some even voted for Donald Trump. And in a community that overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden, there is this strong sense of betrayal, that in their view that Biden allowed what many see as a genocide to occur in Gaza, and that therefore they could not vote for Kamala Harris. And she lost big time in that community, and indeed many others who were sympathetic to Palestinian rights who could not bring themselves to vote for Harris. So I think the Middle East did come into this election. I mean, I think, though, looked broadly, I mean, the decision of Joe Biden to, continue for that, try to get a second term, probably was fatal to the Democrats. That Kamala Harris never was tested in a primary, that she was a last-minute candidate, and that Joe Biden should, for the sake of the Democrats, have stuck to just one term right from the beginning. But essentially, Biden's Middle East policy proved very unpopular, and basically, I think many people challenged him on it and were very unhappy with what's going on, that these wars weren't brought to an end.
Chris, you brought out a very pertinent point, how Biden's Middle East popular was viewed unpopularly in the eyes of the Americans. Are they, so to say, buying what Donald Trump is telling them about ending the war in West Asia?
I'm not sure that they are. I don't think that certainly Arab Americans are necessarily buying that. I think it was more an issue of, for many Arab Americans, they could not put a tick in the box with Kamala Harris, that they felt that she was so complicit in what they see as a genocide going on in Gaza, that they could not endorse her with a vote. Now, I think that, you know, it doesn't mean that they embrace the Trump approach, but, you know, they hold her responsible. It wasn't Donald Trump in the White House over the last year. It was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as vice president. And so Trump has gained through people not voting. Some vote for the third candidate, Jill Stein, you know, and that allowed certainly in certain key areas that to go forward. Of course, there's other issues that determine this election, the economy, you know, probably right out there on top, all sorts of things. But in terms of the Middle East, I think that's how it played out. And, you know, it's, you know, we shall see, you know, just what Trump brings to the table. I think there is an argument to say that he will be urging Netanyahu to get this over with, at least if not by the 20th January, when Trump will enter the White House, one assumes, but very shortly afterwards. So Trump can say, I've brought an end to this war, and give him 3 months to do his worst.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.